Howdy, folks. It's Tommy Cook back for another edition of the Retro Racing Roundup. Let's all just pause for a brief moment and collect ourselves after last week's debacle. It was certainly an exercise in patience. Our reward for making it past that excursion will be the final chapter in the greatest championship fight in NASCAR history. That is the 2011 Ford 400 from Homestead-Miami Speedway. This was not voted on, but rather the race that was the most suggested out of the comments that we've gotten thus far in the discussion in the Discord. Mr. John K., Mr. Garrett Rainey, thank you both very much for recommending me this fantastic race to do a roundup on. If you want to be a part of the action and help decide what is going to be rounded up, is that a verb? If you have a suggestion on what I should do a roundup on next, leave it in the comments. We are voting on what is going to be the topic of every video now from now on. So if you want to be a part of the vote, come join the Discord. That link is in the description, and you can come and vote. Next week's race has already been voted on. And I will reveal what that is, just in case you don't know, at the end of the video. So just a little tease there, just in case you're not going to make it all the way through this fantastic race and this historical race at that. But now it is a cloudy, balmy Sunday afternoon in southern Florida as we hit the grid. Ron Perlman gives us our introduction to set the scene for what has been, up to this point, an unexpected but electric championship battle, to say the least. The chase for the Sprint Cup in 2011 is still the top 12 overall drivers in points. They hadn't introduced the wildcards yet. That was coming next year. The two betting odd favorites to win the championship heading into the chase before the postseason opener at Chicagoland were Kyle Busch and Jimmie Johnson. A lot of people have been waiting on Rowdy to start to clean up his act a little bit, get more consistent out on track. And winning wasn't his problem. Finishing the races, not crashing or crashing other people and damaging his car in the process, was sort of his problem at this point. And Jimmie Johnson, well, I mean, do I really need to say it? Jimmie Johnson has, at this point, won the last 5 championships consecutively, a feat that will never be replicated. And he is always so strong in the chase. It seems like it was really tailor-made for him. And that's not a snarky dig or anything. Jimmie just excels in the postseason. But I'll tell you this much, the championship favorites, the two top contenders heading into it, they don't last very long in this chase before they are overtaken by some new frontrunners. Let's just go from the bottom to the top, 12th up to 1st, and we'll show you who the pretenders are and who the contenders are. Despite being the championship favorite, Kyle Busch will be the driver who comes last in the chase. Not only does he only log 2 top 10 finishes the entire chase, he doesn't even start all 10 races. He gets suspended for wrecking Ron Hornaday intentionally in the Truck Series race at Texas and costing Ron a shot at the Truck Series championship. So Kyle finishes about half a race behind his big brother, Kurt, who absolutely tanks in the final 5 races of the season. More on that in a minute. Next highest up is Ryan Newman, who only logs 1 top 5 in the final 10 races. Above him in 9th is Denny Hamlin, who is still in a points runner-up hangover from last season, only scoring 1 win and 5 top 5s all season long. If Jimmie and Kyle were 1st and 2nd as the championship favorites, I'd say a close 3rd was Jeff Gordon. Heading into the chase, he really got hot right at the end of the season, really seemed to be hitting his stride, but he finishes down in 8th after some up and down races in the chase. 7th will be Dale Earnhardt Jr., who came very close to ending his incredibly long winless streak at several points throughout the 2011 season, but ran well enough to make it in on points, but not well enough to get himself a top 5 in those said points. And then in 6th is your final championship favorite heading into the chase, 5-time and defending series champion Jimmie Johnson. He does score 1 win and 2 second-place finishes, but outside of that, he only has 1 other top 10 in the chase, and it was a 10th-place finish. They have some run-ins on track and some uncharacteristic mechanical problems, so they bow out of the championship about halfway through the 10 races. And so that leaves your top 5. Breakout year for bad Brad Keselowski. He falters in the back half of the chase, can't quite make up for it to contend for a title just yet anyway. 4th place will be Matt Kenseth, who has 2 DNFs in the final 4 races, which is why he is out of contention. And then in 3rd is Kevin Harvick, who made waves really early, but just kind of ran mediocre at Martinsville in Texas, and so now by the slimmest of margins, he is out of contention. He still has an opportunity to finish 2nd, though, in the points if things go his way today. That leaves us with the final two that I don't think really anybody heading into the chase was expecting to at least be the top contenders. The points leader heading into today's festivities is Carl Edwards. Yes, Carl is still with Roush Fenway at this point in the 99 car, and he's trying to mimic what his teammate Matt Kenseth did in 2003 and win the title on consistency alone. He only has one win. It came all the way back in the third race of the season at Las Vegas. Only 9 finishes all season outside of the top 10, and only one of those finishes came in the chase. It was an 11th place finish at Talladega. He finished one spot outside of the top 10 in the chase, and that is his only non-top 10 finish in these final 10 races. It is an incredible run for cousin Carl. Edwards leading by 3 points, just 3 points, heading into the day, looking for his first Cup Series championship. And his opponent is a 2-time Cup Series champion and then future Hall of Famer, first ballot, may I add, Tony Stewart. Tony is in his 3rd full season driving as an owner driver in the sport. Historically, since the 90s, owner drivers have had very little success. But Tony, to this point, has done a pretty good job of breaking that mold and getting owner drivers back on track. His first 2 seasons in the 14, he racked up 6 wins and finished 6th and 7th in the points, respectively. Not bad at all. But now, Stewart heading into the chase, he's sort of the anti-favorite, the reverse favorite. I guess the long shot is the correct terminology there. He himself acknowledged as much. He had this to say, and sounded pretty demoralizing saying it.
If we're going to run this bad, it really doesn't matter whether we make the chase or not, because we're going to be occupying a spot in the chase that somebody else that actually can run for a championship is going to be trying to take, because our stuff's so bad right now that we're just we're wasting one of those top 12 spots right now.
And honest to God, he's really not that wrong. He's not that wrong. He had 3 top 5 finishes all season. Heading into the final 10 races, he entered in the overall points in 9th. Into the chase. But since 2 of the 3 drivers below him actually had wins and Tony did not, he essentially comes into the chase as the 11 seed out of 12. But what Tony does in these next 9 races is just incredible. Win number 1 of the season comes at Chicagoland on fuel strategy. He follows it up the next week at New Hampshire with another win. And now his only 2 stumbles of the chase are the next 2 weeks back-to-back after that. 25th at Dover, 15th at Kansas. After this, his worst finish for the rest of the season is going to be 8th place. He racks up 2 more wins, comes into the final race just 3 points behind Carl Edwards, and he is on an absolute tear. Even if he doesn't win the title at the end of the day, it would still be one of the all-time great NASCAR late season charges. It was fantastic. Here are the scenarios. It's essentially winner take all. If Carl wins the race, he wins the championship. If Tony can win the race, he wins the title outright. But if these two finish in the midfield, basically Tony would need to finish a certain amount of spots ahead of Carl. But the way these two have looked this weekend, that doesn't seem very likely. If by some stretch of the imagination, if this were even possible, if Tony can win the race, but Carl leads the most laps and finishes second to Tony, these two would actually manage to tie in points. And the tie would have to be broken. It would not be a 1v1 race at Bristol like Disney Pixar's Cars would lead you to believe, unfortunately, but rather based on who has the most wins over the course of the entire season. And of course, like I just mentioned, before the chase, Tony didn't have any, but during the chase, he has racked up 4. Carl has not won during the chase and only has 1 victory to his credit all season. So the tiebreaker goes to Tony Stewart. But that's a very unlikely scenario. Like, what are the odds that would even, why would I don't even need to bring it up. Like, why? It's so unlikely it's just, Carl's off to a really good start. Tony was fast in practice, but that did not translate to a good qualifying run for him. Carl puts that Aflac 99 on the pole while Tony is starting all the way back in 9th. There will be several firsts in this race for the Retro Racing Roundup, and I'll point them out as we go. Like, this is our first postseason race or first race in the chase ever that we've done on the Roundup. And likewise, it's our first championship deciding race. If we go in and lump pre-postseason championship deciding races in there, which I eventually we will get to races before 2003 on this channel, I know. But one thing that is yet to change on the Retro Racing Roundup is that we are still on ESPN. Our fearless leader, our hero, Alan Bestwick. Bless up. He is anchoring the team. He is in the booth this time. Thank God. He is flanked, of course, by DJ Dale Jarrett and Andy Petrie. We have our little pre-race interviews here. Tony Stewart says that having 2 titles in the bag and knowing how to navigate racing for a championship gives him the edge on Carl. This is a position which Carl has only been in once before and didn't quite get it done. Carl says because of his success at Homestead itself, he has the advantage heading into the race. And the success that Carl is referring to is the fact that he has won the season finale at Homestead-Miami Speedway 2 times. And as a full-time driver in the Cup Series, he has yet to finish outside of the top 10 at the track. He also finished 3rd in the previous day's Nationwide Series race here. Dr. Jerry Punch, Vince Welch, Jamie Little, Dave Burns, they are the pit reporters today. And as they wrap up their key stories, we are rolling to the line to settle the 2011 chase for the Sprint Cup. 400 miles is 267 laps around Homestead. The championship leader, Carl Edwards, leads the field to green. And if you can't quite pick out where Tony Stewart is right now in the field, you'll be able to spot him right here, as straight away he goes to make a 3 wide to the inside of David Reagan and Ryan Newman into the first turn. It takes Carl a full lap, but he finally clears Martin Truex, driving the MWR 56, up for the lead out of 2. You'll notice that in true fashion that we would expect out of Homestead-Miami Speedway, that the racing line is the high line. I will say these guys, for the most part, aren't really running like the Reddick-Larson line, like right up against the wall, but they're close enough. Lap 3, turn 1, and Kurt Busch's transmission goes kablooey. Now, this may seem like a run-of-the-mill sort of deal here, but what transpires off camera has some serious consequences. As Kurt is getting back to the garage, there is a vehicle that is somewhat obstructing his path. Kurt decides to flip the people around this vehicle off. More on who they are in a minute. But when he gets back to the garage, Dr. Jerry Punch is waiting for an interview. Kurt gets out of the car and immediately decides that he is not having any of it.
Can you get this motherfucker out of my face? You're not out of it yet. You too. Why can't we tape this shit? Yeah, I'd like to do it live too, fucking 10 minutes ago. Hey, never mind. Yeah. Thank you.
After this fracas, however you say that, Shell Pennzoil expressed their concerns directly to Team Penske about Kurt and his behavior, and he is subsequently released from the team at the beginning of December. As a public figure, this is probably the lowest point for Kurt Busch, who has had some serious anger flare-ups up to this point in his career, but his career itself will have to suffer a few more speed bumps after this, which I talk about at great length in the 2012 Finger Lakes 355 at the Glen Retro Racing Roundup video. Kurt will get back out on the track and finish the race, albeit numerous laps down after this. And by the way, this didn't bring out the caution. We're still green. We go to commercial on lap 10 with Tony Stewart not making up any ground, and there is a reason for that. Right now, he is back in 10th. During commercial, coming to the line on lap 13, it begins to rain on Carl Edwards' windshield, so caution number 1 flies. Everybody heads to pit road. No changes for Edwards, who wins the race off of pit road. Stewart says the balance in the car shifted dramatically after about 3 laps. And as the front tire changer comes around that car, he realizes that there's a massive hole in the grill. Who would have thought that Kurt Busch's transmission exploding out of the sides of the fucking car would have put big chunks of metal out on the track? How stupid. By some incredible stroke of luck, this puncture doesn't take the radiator with it, but it does take another pit stop to fix the hole in the grill to get Tony back out on track. He wasn't 10th, So now he'll have to be back in the 40th on this restart. Now let's bring Kurt Busch's story back full circle here. Remember when I said that he flipped off a vehicle in the garage that was somewhat in his way? Well, that vehicle belonged to a person who I never thought I would bring up on this channel. And that is the First Lady of the United States at the time, Michelle Obama. She is the Grand Marshal of the race. She is there promoting the Joining Forces initiative, which encourages community support of U.S. combat veterans. She's also seen pre-race with Carl Edwards, who was on the White House Council for Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition, which is headed by Michelle. But she says she's staying neutral. She's not cheering for Carl or Tony in today's championship battle when asked by Dave Burns. And a side note for Dave Burns and also for Jamie Little a few years down the line, that is a super cool deal that they both got huge interviews like this. Jamie got to interview President Donald Trump before the 2020 Daytona 500. No matter where you stand on politics or these politicians in particular, it's super cool that a NASCAR pit reporter would get an opportunity like that. That is insane. All right, enough of that. Back to the racing here. After an extended yellow, we get back to racing here on lap 22. Edwards clears Truex up again to retake the lead outright. Meanwhile, Tony picks up 8 spots on the first lap under green. We get a battle between the juniors, Dale and Martin, on lap 27. For second, MTJ eventually prevails. 10 laps after the restart, Tony has picked up 15 spots, all the way up to 25th now. He picks up 24th by rooting David Rudiman out of the way. We go to commercial, and for the second time in a row, we come back under caution. This time it is for incident, as Dave Blaney goes for a spin in a cursed number 35 car for Tommy Baldwin Racing. Edwards again enters the pits as the leader, but this time he takes 4 tires and comes out in 4th. Tony Stewart's team, led by crew chief Darian Grubb, decide that they need some more patchwork on the front of that 14, so they will give up all the positions they just gained and will be in the back once again for the next restart. I mentioned that Edwards was 4th off of pit road, but he lines up 5th on this lap 39 restart behind Mark Martin in his last race for Hendrick Motorsports. Kevin Harvick, Carl's mortal enemy up to this point, is Brad Keselowski, and Juan Pablo Montoya, who elected not to pit after he picked up a speeding penalty under the first caution. Out of 2 on the restart, Brad and Kevin split 1-3 wide and then continue battling amongst themselves for the lead. As they look back through the field to find Tony, who was already up 5 spots from where he restarted, right in front of smoke, Trevor Bayne hits the wall and Tony has to make an evasive maneuver. Of course, 2011 is the year that Trevor Bayne wins the Daytona 500, which is undoubtedly one of the best NASCAR moments of all time. I have no doubt that we'll cover it here in a future edition of the Retro Racing Roundup. It's one of my favorite races, start to finish, of all time. And so after this, the Wood brothers are like, hell yeah, dude. Trevor Bayne, yeah, full season. We're going to get him Rookie of the Year. We're doing it all. And that lasts about 8 races before they've decided that they've had enough. Trevor Bayne's next best finish behind the Daytona 500 win is a 17th place at Texas. So they decide they're going to bring his total number of attempts to 17, which is the magic number, I believe, to get him Rookie of the Year contention at that time. Unfortunately, Trevor in his 17 starts doesn't really run that well, and is also competing with Andy Lally for the TRG group, who is doing the full season, or at least close to the full season. So Lally, of course, even with a best finish of 19th all season long, he is going to win the Rookie of the Year. And Lally had actually DNQ'd the 71 car the week before at Phoenix and was subsequently let go. He's not even in this race today. Mike Bliss is in that 71 car. And after this weekend, TRG Motorsports would fold. So this is the last time that we'll see the 71. If you see it puttering around the track on one of these clips, that is the last time you'll ever see the 71 on a NASCAR Cup Series track. So, yeah. I had to get my field filler talk in there, Brock Beard-esque. But we're back on track now. And as all of that with Bayne and Stewart is happening, Edwards and Harvick are battling for second. Edwards can't quite make the bottom work and falls back into line. A couple of laps later, Jeff Gordon catches up to the battle and forces Edwards to the bottom. And not only does Edwards hang on to third, but he's actually going to move up to second on the deal. That's some great work there. Another 2 laps later, Edwards has now caught Keselowski and makes the move for the lead. He takes it back with ease. We go to commercial and come back, and Tony is now up to 17th. Nicole Briscoe says that Carl Edwards is the biggest mover of the race, despite the fact that he started in first. I don't think that is what that means, but it's a good try. Lap 62, Carl's crew chief Bob Osborne says that there is a storm getting ready to roll up to the track, and that storm is not Tony Stewart, although he did just pass 3 more cars and is just outside of the top 10 now. Next lap around, and Marcos Ambrose is running on 7 cylinders. He is running a Roush Yates motor, mind you. And Roush Yates motors all season long have only had 2 failures, which is outstanding. But now Ambrose, running the same engine as Carl Edwards, makes it 3. So keep your eyes out for more of that happening here soon. We go to break and come back, and Tony has sort of held serve in 12th place. Green flag pit stops are underway now. Kevin Harvick, Clint Boyer, and Greg Biffle are the first notable drivers to box. Keselowski pits from second next time by. Tony Stewart follows the Blue Deuce in, and they have to pull some of that tape off the repaired areas of the 14 because he is starting to run a little too hot. A lap later now, and here comes Edwards. 4 tires and away for Edwards. He gives up the lead to Gordon, who will then give up the lead to Kenseth, who will then give up the lead to Jimmy Johnson on lap 83. As Jimmy comes into pit, David Reagan grenades the motor and brings out the caution once again. Reagan and Edwards are teammates, so they are both running Roush Yates engines. They don't explicitly state this on the broadcast, but I think it stands to reason that since this is the final race of the season, and Ambrose and Reagan really aren't running for anything, that they would be trying some R&D stuff with the motors. But either way, this does not alleviate any of the concerns that I'm sure Bob Osborne and Carl Edwards now have that their engine might be a ticking time bomb while they're trying to race for a championship here. It is at this point under the third caution of the race that I realized that the Ford pace car is actually a Miami-Dade County Police Interceptor. That is an interesting choice. Carl gets word under the caution that his right front tire was corded after the longest run of the race, so he is told to drive a little less hard on this run. Edwards restarts in the lead, but Tony back in 10th here on lap 88. Stewart has a big wiggle on the bottom of the track, but gathers it up. As Tony passes Dale Jr. now to move up to 7th, Jr. gets the speed wobbles. We go to break and come back on lap 103 with Edwards ahead of Jeff Gordon by about a second. Tony is now up to 5th. Jimmy Johnson has a problem, which will end up being diagnosed as a carburetor problem. He will get it fixed here soon, but that is not the last we have heard of Jimmy Johnson this race. Lap 107, Alan Bestwick mentions that there is rain in the area, and almost as soon as he does, the caution flies for the second time as a direct result of rain. He says something that plays very funny, just because of recent happenings in NASCAR.
And you got to be careful when you got guys running at 170 and 80 miles an hour when you can literally see the weather coming.
Oh, into the wall they go. The 11 now also caught up in it.
So here's a nice little rainbow for you. Hopefully that cheers you up as I now tell you that for the first time in Roundup history, we will have a red flag. Yay! And it is a result of this rain shower. This will do a few different things, most importantly of which will wash all the rubber off the track. It'll be a completely green and clean track. It also gives the drivers a chance to plan out the rest of their race with their crew chief and engineers knowing what is left ahead of them. And it also lets enough time pass for the sun to go down and the lights to come on. It's everybody's dream, the Homestead Championship race ending under the lights. We get interviews from, of course, quite a few drivers under the red flag, the saddest of which is David Rudiman, who is starting his last race in the 00. He says it's more bitter than sweet today. We now know that it was Aaron's who sort of got the ball rolling on his release, but the 00 turned into the 55, which became the Aaron's Dream Team car, which saw Mark Martin, Michael Waltrip, and Brian Vickers split time behind the wheel. Still a pretty crappy deal for Rudiman, who went on to drive part-time for Tommy Baldwin Racing, trying to get as many owner points for the 10 car. For when Danica Patrick was going to come in and start to field that 10 car full time towards the end of the 2012 season. But yeah, this is the last time we see David Rudiman in a competitive capacity in the Cup Series. It's too bad. An hour passes, and then cars begin to roll off of pit road once again. They are still working on Jimmy Johnson's car as they do, as well as Trevor Bayne's 21. After a few more pace laps, they finally open up pit road. Pretty much everybody heads in, and Edwards will lose 2 spots on exit, and Tony will gain 1 and come out right behind the 99. This is the first time we've seen these two really together the entire race. This is about to get exciting. We finally restart in lap 117. Edwards in the bottom, Stewart on the top. Edwards has to check up not to ram Kevin Harvick, and that allows Tony to pass Carl on the track for the first time all race. He will then go around Kevin Harvick for second. Harvick on 2 tires is going the wrong direction. 3 laps later, Edwards has pulled up to the 14, who is hounding the 24. The top 3 nose to tail with the championship in the balance. Down the backstretch, next time by, there goes Tony up to the lead. Remember that if either one of these two win this race, they win the championship no matter what. Gordon and Edwards start to fade a little bit from the 14 through the next couple of laps. Lap 130, Edwards finally gets around Gordon for second, and the scenario that I mentioned at the top of the show here, with Edwards leading the most laps behind Tony Stewart, is unfolding in front of our very eyes. These two, after 36 races, are tied at 2,403 points apiece. Words don't do it justice. Words don't do it justice. How incredible it is. So remember when Kurt Busch earlier littered the track with his transmission and NASCAR decided that they weren't going to throw a caution for some reason? Well, Trevor Bayne is now going to hit the wall out of turn 4 for the second time this race. This time he pulls down the apron with a not yet flat but soon to be flat right rear tire. And NASCAR will now throw a debris caution. LOL. 2008 to 2013, you could dispute those years a little bit, but this is like peak phantom debris caution territory, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised by this, but it's still really annoying. It's really annoying. Here comes just about everybody to pit road, and Tony Stewart's right front tire changer can't get the tire off. The lug gets stuck in the gun, and they have to pull it out. It's going to cost him 8 positions. Kevin Harvick must have left side tires that are made out of adamantium, because I swear he has only made 2 tire pit stops this entire race. He wins the race off of pit road again, with Carl Edwards now coming out in 4th. So Stewart has got to climb out of another hole here. He restarts P9 with Edwards behind 3 drivers who only took 2 tires. Stewart immediately takes it 3 wide on the restart, but can't find anywhere to go because they are 4 wide in front of him. Lap 141, Edwards makes his first pass since the restart, moving Tony's teammate Ryan Newman back to 4th. On the same lap, Jimmy Johnson has a solo unassisted spin, followed by a save, and then a second, very much assisted spin off of the front bumper of David Gilliland. The bad day for the 48 just keeps getting worse. Under the caution, Bob Osborne thinks that Carl is trying to wreck the 56 for some reason and tells him to stop racing so aggressively. Carl is as cool as a cucumber and tells him that he is worrying too much. On the restart, Kyle Busch takes Carl 3 wide, which opens the door for Tony to go underneath of Carl. As these two are battling, Kyle and Kevin are battling as well. So Carl on the top, Tony on the bottom. They decide to hit F it and just make a casual 4 wide move in the middle of their championship battle. Like, holy shit. These guys can literally do whatever they want. It is insane. Matt Kenseth, unfortunately, he sort of sets a pick on his own teammate, and the battle is over, at least for the time being, as Smoke moves up to 3rd. Tony will now click off 2nd from Ryan Newman, and then in just another lap or 2, will move up to the top spot once again. Edwards, in the meantime, will manage to get back up to 3rd. We are getting ready to go to commercial right as another caution comes out. This is the biggest crash of the night as Jamie McMurray drives through Landon Castle, who is then going to collect poor old Trevor Bayne as well as Cole Witt. Here comes everybody to pit road again, and this isn't a rerun. It's another pit gun problem for Tony Stewart. They end up calling an audible and just keeping it as a 2-tire stop because it took them 14 goddamn seconds to get the right rear tires swapped out. Carl comes out in 2nd after taking just 2 tires. It's so strange to hear Tony be the beacon of positivity after the 3rd major mishap of the race, but here he is reassuring the crew after the mistake.
Deep breath, guys. We come from a lot further back than that to get there.
Dale Jr. and Jeff Burton have stayed out under this caution, so they lead the way. Jamie McMurray has also stayed out and decides that causing the last caution wasn't enough. This time he swipes across Carl's nose in turn 1, and that could have ended really poorly. Tony immediately finds his way to the back bumper of Carl as they plow through the speedy dry down the back straightaway. They are 3 wide for the lead and 4 wide just inside of the top 10, with the 2 championship leaders smack dab in the middle of it all. They eventually pick their way up to 3rd and 4th. 100 laps to go now. Carl tries to get around MTJ for 3rd, but won't actually make that pass for another 5 full laps. 2 laps after that, Carl passes Matt Kenseth for the lead, and Tony finally gets past Truex for 3rd. 88 to go. Now Stewart gets around Kenseth to move up to 2nd. Carl asks his team to tighten up the car just a touch on the next stop. Over the next 11 laps, Carl pulls away from Tony, but with 76 laps to go, it's another Roush Yates engine failure. This time, it's Greg Biffle. That is the 2nd Roush in-shop engine failure, the 3rd associated team to drop a motor this race alone. Bob has made Carl aware of the motor problems for some reason. I don't know why you would do that to your driver, but he does it anyway. Pit stops start happening with about 70 laps to go under green, which means that everyone should need one more stop. Edwards comes in with 65 laps to go, but Tony is going to stay out on track for another 8 laps in full coast and save mode. He wants this to be his last stop. This is a huge gamble. Darian Grubb is literally putting it all out on the line with this call. Tony is out of fuel coming down pit road here. He keeps the car rolling and refires the car and gets away. Tony just barely stays on the lead lap. As he is working his out lap, it starts raining again, and the caution is out once again, the 3rd time for rain. Now, this is going to help Tony, of course, because he'll be good on fuel to the end. But now, everybody is going to pit to pack their cars full of fuel, so everybody will be good on fuel, assuming we don't go to a green-white checkered. Of course, with everybody pitting and Tony being good on fuel, Tony is going to stay out and just save under the pace laps here. And, this is a pretty strong shower. They almost lose the track to this shower. That's how bad this is. They immediately put the dryers out on the track. They keep the cars rolling to keep as much heat in the track surface as possible. If it keeps raining, there's a good chance that they end up having to call this race. And if they do, Edwards at this point would beat Tony Stewart by 2 points. But they don't do that, luckily, as we work an astounding 13 laps under the caution. But the track is saved. It's the very best of friends. Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski on the front row holding hands coming to the restart with 38 laps to go. Tony Stewart lines up in 3rd with Clint Bowyer to his outside and Carl Edwards back in 5th. Here comes the patented Tony Stewart restart bonsai smackdown move to the inside for the race lead. As they continue to work 3 wide down the back straightaway, Busch will finally yield from the middle in 3, and Edwards makes the move to the inside for 3rd as Stewart gets around Brad for the race lead. Edwards underneath of Keselowski has a big wiggle there. He won't get the pass done for another 3 laps as Stewart tries to set sail up front. We are now back in the tiebreaker scenario as Edwards absolutely has to muscle this car around the top side of Homestead-Miami to even try to get up to Tony in the race lead. The gap stays almost the same for the next 20 laps, right around 1.2 to 1.8 seconds from Edwards up to Stewart. With 12 laps to go, these two are going to start to hit some lap traffic. And now with 8 to go, that lap traffic decides, we're not going to move out of the way. Sorry. This is Edwards' last hope here, as Tony has been absolutely untouchable on this run. He gets to within a second now of Tony, but as soon as they are out of lap traffic, Tony is back on rails. Carl has given it everything he has here, but it is just not going to be enough. The gap opens up even further with this call from our hero, Alan Bestwick. It is official.
2002, he was the champion. 2005, he was the champion, those driving for someone else. This time, he's an older driver, and he's going to become a 3-time NASCAR Sprint Cup champion. Tony Stewart wins it.
Tony Stewart wins his 5th race of the chase and ties Carl Edwards in the points and takes the Sprint Cup championship. on a tiebreaker, which is more than likely the only time this is ever going to happen if things continue the way that they are. Darian Grubb wins his only career championship as a crew chief. Ironically, he's going to leave Stewart-Haas Racing in the offseason and go to Joe Gibbs Racing. In 2015, his driver is going to be Carl Edwards. So a nice touch of irony there. Darian celebrating with his family. He's obviously very moved, and it's a job well done for crew chief number 14. We cut to an interview with Carl Edwards where he says that was as hard as he could drive the thing, and says that he expects to be in this position in 2012. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. It was a runner-up hangover for the ages for Carl Edwards, who won a total of zero races in 2012 and logged 2 top 5 finishes all season. He would not be in another position to win a championship again until 2016, and that will more than likely be a future installment of the Roundup on its own. So looking forward to that one in a not very happy sort of way. And then there's Tony, our friend Tony, who passed over 60 cars through the course of this race. He was an absolute frickin' madman. Working up through the field. There are some rumors that persist, and they're the same rumors that you hear today with the playoff format that Edwards and Stewart, who run first and second, obviously, they didn't have the same tech inspection. They were running nitrous-rich fuel. They had softer sticker sets than everyone else. And I'm not saying that they don't, because I don't know. I have no idea. But what I'm saying is the years before this and the years after this, up until 2014, we will not have the top 2 runners in the championship running first and second in the races. It won't be like this until we get to the Final 4 format. Just as Tony climbs out of the car in victory lane, it has started to pour once again. He says that the prevailing factor about this team that he has helped build around himself is that there is absolutely no quit in any of them, which is why they were able to go from the back to the front, to the back, to the front, to the back, to the front. And that is how we leave Homestead-Miami Speedway at the end of the 2011 NASCAR Sprint Cup Series season in 2011. In 2012, Tony would start strong but finish pretty mediocre. He scores 3 wins and finishes 9th in the overall points. And then in 2013 and 14, Tony would not even race full-time due to some extenuating circumstances. And then he pretty much struggles for his last 2 seasons with a 15th-place points finish in his final season in 2016. So in terms of classic Tony, despite him running for another 5 seasons after this, this is our last true good look, I think, at Tony Stewart in his prime. But this championship run, no doubt, is one of the first things that everybody thinks of when they think of Tony Stewart driving cars at his hardest and at his best. So with that said, let's give this the old Roundup rating. I don't know what that is. I don't know what to do with my hands a lot of the times, Ricky Bobby. So the racing at Homestead was kind of crazy on the restarts. It was crazy on the restarts, but it cooled off on a lot of the longer runs. Homestead at this point is not really a 2-lane track. You have to work really hard to make passes on the bottom. So it sort of cools off on the long runs. I'm probably going to rate it at about a 7.5. For the finish, me skimming over the final 30 laps doesn't do the tension here a lot of justice, especially watching it live. I forget how old I am. I can't do math. But I was watching this as a child in a sports bar. We were the only 2 people there for NASCAR. And even in that sort of vapid, sterile environment for NASCAR, it was still, the tension was palpable. So me just talking over it doesn't really do it justice, especially if you're watching it live. But at the same time, the top 2 drivers pulling away from the entire field and staying the exact same distance apart from one another, on paper shouldn't be that exciting, and it kind of isn't, knowing how it turns out anyway. So the finish, I'm going to say, is a 6 out of 10. I may be skimping on it just a little bit. For memorability, I think this is a 9 out of 10. When people look back on the days before the playoffs, this is always cited, and rightly so, as the reason we shouldn't have the playoff format or the Final Four format. It's two gunslingers having a 10-week duel that culminates with them going head-to-head, one-on-one, mano-a-mano, one last time. It is absolutely captivating. And for historical significance, man, I really waffled on this one. I'm going to go with a 9.5, though. I just think just the fact that they tied for the freaking points championship alone is probably enough to justify this score. But I also think that whether or not it's a good thing, and this is the same thing with the Brickyard 400 from 2008 last week, this one is going to be dependent on you and your opinion and how you feel about the state of NASCAR in 2023, the year this is recorded. Whether or not this is a good thing, the following two seasons where there is sort of a lackluster championship battle that follows, it's directly created a scenario where NASCAR they are clamoring for Game 7 feels every single championship race, and thus that is what created the playoff system. So this race, for better or for worse, has directly influenced NASCAR on creating the playoffs, which has decided every single Cup Series champion since 2014 up to this point in 2023. That makes this race incredibly important. I would argue maybe the second most important race of all time. And that is what this 10 is reserved for that I'm not giving out here. Very historically important race for a number of reasons. 9.5. Ahoy, there she be, mateys. A 32 out of 40, which is... that's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. Just a 1.5 points behind what I scored at the Watkins Glen race in 2012. Is that fair? Probably not. It's probably not fair, to be honest. But I mean, it's what's happened. So can't go back and change it. I feel like sort of the hoopla about the 2011 Ford 400 is because of the championship battle itself and how the race turned out. Maybe not the race itself. I mean, this race could have been at Oxford Plains and had sort of the same hoopla about it. And maybe they still finish first and second, but Edwards wins by 16 laps. Who knows? But maybe I'm wrong. And you know what? I'm wrong all the time, so I'm probably wrong, yes. There are my thoughts on the 2011 Ford 400, the greatest championship battle of all time. Thank you all very much for watching this lovely little video. I appreciate it more than you'll ever know. For the next time on the Retro Racing Roundup, the viewers have decided. They have given me their guidance, and they have decided that we are staying in 2011. And we are going back to the 2011 Brickyard 400. It is one of the all-time great Turn 200 memes. And I cannot wait to tell everybody why. If you want to be here for the next one, you want to make sure that you're here on time for the next one, be sure to hit subscribe on your way out from this video. But until we meet again, this has been Tommy Cook here on Turn 200. Thank you all very much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.